So let's talk about my favorite topic of the day is the president making one of my favorite moves he's made in the last few weeks, which is revoking the security clearance of John Brennan. I wish he did it months ago, but it's great that he did it yesterday, in my opinion. But you're you have more expertise in these matters than I do. So give me your unvarnished thoughts.
Well, I've been calling for months publicly for John Brennan's clearance to be revoked. I am very, very glad that the president did it. I hope it will be the first of many, Comey, Rice, and others included. I think everybody who's painting this as a First Amendment freedom of speech issue really doesn't know what they're talking about. Nobody in America has a right to a security clearance. There's only one person who has a right and who gets it automatically, and that's the incumbent president. He doesn't have to do a background security check. As soon as he is, the president or president-elect, he gets his clearance. Everybody else, it's a privilege. I have served twice in the government. I served in the White House under President Trump. I served prior to that in the Department of Defense. On both occasions, I had to take an oath of public service to defend the Constitution from enemies, foreign and domestic, and to bear good faith and allegiance to the same. John Brennan is doing neither. John Brennan, who voted for the Communist Party before he joined the CIA, is undermining American national security every time he goes on national television and lambasts our president and describes him as a traitor. And I'd like to make one point here. I'm going to give credit to my Fox News colleague, Daniel Hoffman, who spent more than 30 years in the CIA, was our station chief in Moscow. He gives a very, very chilling example. If somebody around the world hears John Brennan, who they know has the top clearances, go on television and say that the president of the United States is likely being blackmailed or under the control of Vladimir Putin, that undermines our national security, because people who don't know who John Brennan is and that he's a political activist will not cooperate with America if they think that we are in the thrall of a country like Russia. That is John Brennan's service to the Kremlin. He supported them at the height of the Cold War. He's still serving them today. Hopefully he's not getting a paycheck for it. But at the end of the day, this has to be done, and it should be the first of several.
Yeah, and so who would you go to next? Because we're still seeing, I came into studio today, and I don't tend to watch CNN. Luckily, we have a great staff at Breitbart TV who handles that for us. I tuned in to producer Paul at CNN on the monitor today, and who was talking about it? None other than James Clapper, the former director of national intelligence, who is every bit as much of a deep state megaphone as John Brennan is, just on the CNN side of things. I mean, I'm hoping he's next, but it is the lack of self-awareness as CNN trots out the same ilk of John Brennan. I mean, it just shows you how widespread the problem is across the media.
Scott Adams did a wonderful podcast yesterday.
The Dilbert guy, yeah.
Where he said the president has just branded the deep state with this action, and he was right. Why? Because he showed a screen capture from CNN where they had all the key individuals of the deep state on what looked like a wanted poster, and they're all up there. So thank you, CNN. It's Hayden, it's Clapper, it's Susan Rice, it's Samantha Power, and it's anybody at the highest level of the FBI and DOJ who had their fingerprints on the Pfizer warrant, the illegal Pfizer warrant to spy on the Trump campaign. That is the definition of the deep state, using the intelligence community for political purposes. So all of these individuals, and I would also like to check whether Hillary Clinton still has her clearance as well.
Yeah, and one thing that's interesting here is you're seeing so much you're seeing so much fake news here. I'm reading this. I don't want to misreport this, but CNN's Jim Sciutto reported that the current director of national intelligence, Coates, was the senior most intelligence official in the United States, was not consulted on the revoking of John Brennan's security clearance. And he's been corrected that the president did consult with Dan Coates. So CNN goes out there and is just smearing the president again with fake news. How come the mistake is never that the president consulted extra people Dr. G. It's always that the president did not consult the director of national intelligence. CNN reports that.
Exactly.
And he's wrong. He's dead wrong. This is a guy who's a top national security reporter and anchor for CNN. And again, it's another fake news report.
You know, you want to know the reason? It's exactly the same reason why Facebook and Twitter, when they throttle conservatives and they found to shadow ban and use their quality filters, it never seems, when they say, oh, it's just accidental, the algorithms accidentally did that, it never happens accidentally to progressives or to leftists or to leading DNC voices. It never happens to Antifa. It never happens to Black Lives Matter. It's the same reason, because these people aren't journalists. These people aren't independent businessmen. They are activists, whether it's Twitter or whether it's CNN. These are activists with an agenda, and it is a political agenda. And the one thing they care about, I mean, it's like the Manafort trial. The Manafort trial isn't about the crimes that Paul Manafort committed or may have committed. The Manafort trial is about taking down the President of the United States. That's all CNN cares about. So, you know, there is no massive conspiracy, but you don't need a tinfoil hat to understand that all of these players have one agenda: to delegitimize the people's choice of president and to undermine the incumbent 45th president of the United States. It's that simple.
Dr. Sebastian Gorka is with me. Do yourself a favor and you can pre-order Why We Fight, his latest book. Also, you could pick up Defeating Jihad, his first book, which I read, enjoyed very much, and I think is a great crash course into the jihadism around the world. And let's turn our focus towards the Middle East and talk about Turkey a little bit. Dr. G. And I want to get a clear sense of how Turkey has really gotten itself into the news cycle in a major way. We know Erdogan, who's been the premier there for probably about a decade and a half. He's got these designs on making Turkey really reinstalling the Ottoman Empire, making Turkey a much bigger global power than it has been. And it doesn't seem like he's doing himself a lot of favors right now. And he's threatening the United States in terms of trade. And I want to get your sense of what are the key details here that us lay people might need to know.
Well, let's start with the key strategic one. This is a country that has massive geostrategic import. If you just look at the size of it, you look at the location of it, this is one of the most important geopolitical nations in the whole of the Eurasian landmass. During the Cold War, it had the largest European army, and it protected NATO's southern flank from the Soviet Union. So you have to start with geography. Is destiny, according to some. Secondly, we need to recognize its history since the dissolution of the original caliphate. After World War I, the Ottoman Empire ceased to exist when a very charismatic, young, handsome Ottoman officer called Mustafa Kemal Atatürk realized the only way his nation can survive the post-World War I situation was to secularize it, to take what was the caliphate, what was the theocracy, and turn it into a modern republic. He became the first head of state of the Turkish Republic, and he very aggressively secularized it by dissolving the caliphate in 1924, and that's how Turkey became one of the most successful Muslim nations of the 20th century. Now, all of that has gone by the wayside. In the last 30 years, the fundamentalists have had a project to dissemble the Atatürk legacy and to recreate a theocratic Turkey and to bask in the glory of former Ottoman years, and that's who Erdogan is. Erdogan needs to be understood as a kind of domestic Turkish version of the Muslim Brotherhood. He has a globalist vision for a neo-Ottomanist regime, and as such, he's not behaving like a NATO ally, and he's getting in bed with some very, very bad people. You saw as soon as the president announced the tariffs, what happened? Erdogan picked up the phone and he called Vladimir Putin. So right now, this is great game, if you will, version 2.0, and things are not going well in Turkey, Alex.
Yeah. So, what do you make of Erdogan threatening to boycott the United States, particularly with our electronics? I mean, it's excuse me for being an ugly American here, but that sounds like a pretty weak effort. I mean, but what is it? Could this be potentially hurtful to us?
No, this is rusty saber rattling. This it's not America does not America will not notice a Turkish boycott.
That's what I thought.
I mean, if you look, if you just look at the fact, for example, that thanks to the president's recent tax reform, we have American companies in the last 6 months have repatriated $300 billion to the United States. The American economy is once again, finally, the engine of the global economy. This threat from Turkey sounds good for domestic Turkish consumption, and that's what it's about. It's about rabble rousing his base, but in terms of the effect on America, utterly nugatory.
Dr. Sebastian Gorka is with me just about every week at this exact moment, and he is a Fox News contributor. He's also the author of Why We Fight. Dr. G, it's great to talk to you as always. We'll talk to you next week.
God bless. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Dr. G.